It's 2025 in the small village of Cybersdorf. With a population put to shame by any Walmart parking lot, a handful of people work away on building motorcycles in this tiny garage. A small, seemingly insignificant shop buried between residential houses. But little did you know, this shop is solely responsible for BMW's early Dakar success. In fact, after a big scandal which ended up disqualifying the Bavarians, this tiny shop became the center of their rally racing efforts.
This is not the story of a tiny motorcycle builder. It is the story of one of Dakar's most important manufacturers, HPN.
But how did we get here? After its first edition in '79, the Dakar caught people's eyes. It quickly gathered the reputation of the world's toughest rally, and with it, the attention of manufacturers all around the globe.
Already we began to see a little bit more involvement from some of the car manufacturers. Volkswagen made an official entry.
From Volkswagen in cars to Yamaha and finally BMW. The Bavarians realized the potential unlocked by winning such event, but they needed a rider to represent them. Introducing Hubert Auriol, Frenchman who took part in Dakar's maiden voyage. After battling with other Yamahas during that first edition, Auriol quickly realized that, for those times, having a bigger, more powerful bike would prove to be a huge advantage.
So, in 1980, Auriol needed more power. BMW needed an amazing rider. And so, the lineup was complete, with the Frenchmen lining up beside Fenouil for the world's toughest rally.
Now, while this was technically a factory effort, you have to realize, the bikes were literally built in a garage by the team's motorsport director, together with a close acquaintance of his. This was the way of doing things back in the 80s. With all preparations complete, the team lined up for the start in Paris. Auriol kept trading blows with the Yamahas through the cold prologue in France, all the way to the dusty tracks of Africa. Stage after stage, he chased the little single Japanese bikes. It was looking like he was going to get the win. As the last stage came about, on Lac Rose, Auriol crossed the finish line in first place.
So, why is there no mention of this? BMW seems to have forgotten about it. It's like they don't recall this year ever happening. Just like I don't recall you clicking the subscribe button. Cheers.
Well, there is a reason for it. You see, Auriol crossed the finish line in first place, but the joy was short-lived. It turns out the BMW had a major problem with its gearbox and required external assistance to get moving again. And that was kind of illegal. Allegedly, BMW tried to swoop it under the rug, but when the organizers found out, they quickly disqualified the German team for cheating. That year, Cyril Neveu took home the trophy on board his nimble, underpowered Yamaha.
And the Marot brothers had to settle for third, and Cyril Neveu took his second victory for Yamaha.
For the Bavarians, this was a big blow.
They were inches away from glory, but all their hopes and dreams were shattered. All because of a mechanical issue. That could never happen again.
That's when, for 1981, BMW's motorsport director commissioned a little shop in Germany to convert 3 R80GSs for entering the desert race. A little shop called HPN. The 3 founders behind it worked tirelessly throughout the night, together with the BMW director. Weeks had gone by, then months, but the preparations were finally in order. Bikes were ready, now it was time for Auriol to see what he could do. From the get-go, this edition proved to be quite a challenge, as navigating gave many riders a headache. Top contenders got lost and decided to stick together, only to get even more lost. But there was a constant. Day by day, Auriol's BMW and the Yamahas kept trading blows.
A big battle in the motorbike section through Mali between the big BMW of Hubert Auriol and Fenouil and the agile Yamaha of Baku and Morel.
Finally, when they reached Dakar, the race could only be won by one.
For Auriol, it was the first of several wins on the Dakar.
And over the horizon, a screaming boxer twin could be heard howling towards the finish line. It was Hubert Auriol, carrying a huge BMW flag. This time, it was for good. The BMW had finally won the world's toughest race. This is where the HPN legacy poured its foundation, where a legendary name took birth.
But let's take a step back. who exactly were HPN? The company was founded back in 1979 by Alfred Hupfeld, Klaus Pepperl, and Michael Neher. That's where their name comes from as well, from these three founders. Located in a tiny village in Germany, the trio worked on tubular racing chassis for BMW Boxers.
Albert was actually racing one of his own creations for some time, and with more interest, they turned this passion into a business. They quickly grew a local reputation for quality and a lack of compromise. In fact, everything that came out of their hands was as close to perfection as it was going to get.
And fun fact, ever since '82, HPN has been manufacturing motorcycles from the same little garage. But more on that later, because the Dakar saga was far from over.
In 1985, BMW had accumulated 3 rally wins under their belt, and they were hungry for a 4th. This time, their lineup also included Gaston Rayet, the tiny racer that could tame any motorcycle beast. And the beast this BMW was, wide, tall, and extremely heavy. Not far into the race, Gaston's teammate broke his wrist and had to be taken home. That year, the HPN rider won multiple stages and was slowly but surely closing down on the Hondas ahead of him. After a brave last-minute push, BMW snatched the title from the Japanese. Second time in a row for Gaston, this added the 4th trophy for the Bavarian manufacturer. Between Oriol and Rayet, they had secured the titles for 81, 83, 84, and 85. This was truly a dominating spree for BMW, one that, without HPN, they could have never hoped for.
The fascinating part is, you have to take a close look at what HPN did with the bikes in order to realize the scale of their contribution. The first thing this tiny tuner did was tackle the engine situation.
They increased the Boxer's capacity to 1043cc, but managed to use shorter cylinders and lighter pistons. This way, despite the increase in capacity, the Boxer Twin actually ended up narrower than a standard machine. They used the Ferrari F1 supplier to build them special titanium rods, added a dual ignition system, and changed the transmission gear ratios to give a lower first gear for crawling and a higher fifth for those flat-out desert fields. That's how HPN bikes managed to put down 75 horsepower, a full 50% increase over the stock bikes. This power figure was BMW's greatest advantage when battling the single-cylinder Yamahas.
But HPN never skimped on parts, so they also had to modify the clutch in order to sustain the abuse of the added torque figures.
Next up, the guys at HPN switched their focus on the chassis. They reinforced the steering head and swing arm mounting points in order to create a stiffer base for their race machine. That swing arm? They cut it in half and welded a 10cm extension to it, effectively increasing the motorcycle's overall wheelbase. But that's when they realized that a single-sided unit, as the stock bikes had, was not going to be strong enough, so they engineered a second swing arm on the other side of the rear wheel with its own independent shock absorber. The rear part of the frame also suffered extensive modifications in order to accommodate the extra fuel tanks. Suspension was completely thrown out and replaced with 300mm Marzocchi forks and twin WP shocks.
But with great power comes great responsibility. In a nutshell, HPN had to make sure their machine had the fuel capacity to finish Dakar stages. That's how they engineered a new 43-liter front fuel tank, and later also added the 6-liter middle one and another 9-liter at the back.
This gave the BMW a range of up to 1,000 kilometers, more than enough to never run out during the grueling race. But all that made the bike 10 centimeters longer and taller. Also, when fully fueled up, the Giant weighed in at 230 kilos.
That's similar to a modern-day rally bike, carrying a trials bike as luggage. The engineers revised its braking system to account for the weight, but no matter how you put it, the HPN was a complete animal.
But you have to realize, those were different times. Back then, you needed more power, and that was the only way to get it, by sacrificing basically everything else. It was a race to extract as much engine performance as possible while disregarding the rest. Many people seem to think that all those BMW Boxers were HPN's creation, but that would, in fact, be wrong. You see, according to their catalog, HPN only really built the old Boxers in 81 and 85. So that begs the question. BMW also won in 83 and 84. Who built those bikes?
Those were the creations of Herbert Scheck.
After 25 years of competing in the International 6-Day Trophy, Herbert was told he had gotten too old for that race. so he switched over to rally racing. The BMW icon ended up taking part in 15 Dakar editions, and between 83 and 84, he was responsible for building the bikes for BMW.
Those years brought great success to the Bavarians, as Oriol and Gaston took the victories in both years.
In fact, 84 was a complete BMW domination, securing the top 2 spots on the podium. That same year, on a BMW, Herbert managed to win the privateer category too. In fact, Herbert wasn't just a legend with BMW, he had a deep passion for motorcycle racing.
At 85 years of age, he was still competing in vintage enduro races. That's how we know this wasn't just a job for him, it was his life calling.
Back to HPN. After their early success, they were commissioned by BMW to build 10 rally replicas to later be sold towards privateers. The Bavarians were going to award 35,000 marks if one such privateer managed to win the amateur class. But this commission kickstarted HPN's current work, because the little shop in Germany never stopped innovating. They were some of the first builders to adopt CAD technology and 3D scanning. They managed to get their custom chassis approved by the German TÜV. They did a lot of prototyping work for BMW. In fact, that's how their modern paralever swing arm came to life. It was an HPN creation. They did the work on the later HP2 platform.
What's interesting though is HPN and BMW obviously had a really close relationship. But with that, the German tuner was never more than a collaborator. BMW never bought them, they were simply an old, faithful client of HPN.
While their legacy started by building factory bikes, their name got cemented in the history books with their later creations. They opened their gates to the public and developed 6 boxer versions, all based on R80GS platform. From the base model, all the way to a fully tricked out Rally Replica Rally Sport model, HPN managed to bring the old boxer nostalgia to regular people. And their reputation of never compromising was spotless.
They would take each frame, sandblast it and reinforce it. They would do multiple suspension and braking system upgrades. Basically, as a customer, you were going to get a full-on factory rally bike from those times. And in fact, you still can.
Fast forward to modern times, only 2 of the founders are left as part of the company. Even still, in their little German shop, they keep on building the famous boxer rally bikes. According to internet users, their waiting times range from 1 year all the way to 8 years, depending on the project.
In fact, they even stopped taking orders for specific models altogether. That's how you know your reputation is legendary. And that's why, up to this day, I would argue HPN is one of, if not the best Dakar manufacturer.
Ultimately, it's a company that never forgot about its roots, never compromised and never disappointed. In a way, they have a spotless record. They've had that for over 40 years. How many bike builders can say that? Thanks for watching.